Welcome back to Jack and Rex Tales. The foreclosure notice had been sitting on the kitchen table for 11 days. Jack Thompson hadn't moved it, hadn't thrown it away, hadn't called the number printed at the bottom. He just let it sit there beside an empty coffee mug and a photograph so old the edges had gone soft and yellow with time. Outside, the Cascade Mountains had turned white and silent, the kind of silence that doesn't comfort a man, the kind that closes in. It was January in Oregon, the worst winter in 30 years according to the radio before the power went out. The cabin groaned under the weight of the snow piling on its roof. The fireplace threw weak orange light across the walls, barely enough to push back the dark. And Jack sat in the one chair he owned that didn't wobble, staring at the fire like a man who had already made a decision and was just waiting for the courage to act on it. He was 50 years old. He looked older. 23 years in the United States Army will do that to a man. It carves lines into his face that have nothing to do with age and everything to do with what he's seen. Jack had seen enough. 2 deployments to Iraq, 1 to Afghanistan, and 1 final mission overseas that he never talked about, the one that came home with him in a way the others didn't. He reached across the table and picked up the photograph. 2 soldiers, young, laughing, standing in front of a dusty vehicle somewhere in the Middle East, squinting into brutal sunlight. Jack on the left, and on the right, a tall man with broad shoulders and a grin that made everyone around him feel like things were going to be okay. Leo Vance. Jack set the photograph back down, face up. He never put it face down. That felt too much like giving up on Leo twice. "I don't know what I'm still doing here, brother," Jack said quietly to the empty room. His voice was rough. He didn't use it much anymore. He stood slowly, joints aching the way they always did in the cold, and walked to the window. The blizzard had swallowed everything. The tree line was gone. The old truck in the driveway was just a white shape now, buried and still. The world beyond the glass had disappeared entirely. And Jack thought, not for the first time, but with a heaviness he hadn't felt before, that it would be so easy to just walk out into it, put on his army coat, step off the porch, let the mountain take him quietly, the way the war hadn't. He had already reached for his coat when he heard it, a sound so faint he almost missed it beneath the howling wind. A scratch. He went still. Another scratch, slow, weak, coming from the front door. Jack stood motionless for a moment, coat half on, listening. The wind screamed, the fire popped, and then, underneath all of it, a low sound. Not a whimper exactly, something steadier than that, something deliberate. He crossed the room and opened the door. The cold hit him like a wall. And there, half collapsed on the porch steps, covered in snow so thick he was nearly invisible, was a German Shepherd. The dog lifted his head. His eyes, dark and deep and completely steady, found Jack's face immediately. Jack dropped to his knees right there in the doorway, cold forgotten, coat forgotten, everything forgotten. "Hey," he breathed. "Hey, easy now." The dog's fur was matted with ice. One front paw was wrapped in a makeshift cloth bandage, soaked through and frozen stiff. His breathing was slow and labored. He was old, 10 years at least, maybe more, and whatever had brought him through this storm had cost him enormously. But those eyes never wavered. Jack got his arms under him carefully and lifted him. The shepherd was heavy, solid muscle even in old age, and he didn't fight the handling. He simply leaned into Jack's chest the way trained dogs do, with complete trust, and let himself be carried inside. Jack laid him gently on the rug in front of the fire. "Stay with me," he murmured, already moving to find towels, already unwrapping the frozen bandage from the paw with hands that had stopped shaking for the first time in years. He worked quietly and carefully for a long time, warming the dog, cleaning the wound, wrapping it again with strips of clean cloth. The shepherd watched him the whole time, those dark eyes following every movement, patient and unblinking. When the worst of the cold had left the dog's body, Jack sat back on his heels and let out a long breath. That was when he noticed the collar. It was old military-issue nylon, worn nearly through in places. and hanging from it were two things, a standard ID tag and a small metal tube sealed at both ends, the kind used to protect documents in the field. Jack's hand moved to the tag first. He turned it over. One word engraved on the front: Rex. The air left Jack's lungs like he'd been struck. His hand was trembling again when he reached for the metal tube. He unscrewed the cap slowly, as though some part of him already knew, already understood, that what was inside would change everything. He tipped the tube and a small rolled paper slid into his palm. He unrolled it. The handwriting hit him before the words did. He would have known that handwriting anywhere. He had read letters in it, field notes in it, birthday cards in it. He had watched those hands write in dusty forward operating bases under generator light while rockets fell somewhere in the distance. Leo's handwriting. Jack's jaw tightened, his eyes burned. He read, "If you're reading this, brother, it means Rex found you, and it means I need you one more time. I know you think it's over. I know you've been carrying this alone, but I left something for you, Jack. Something important. Something that has to reach the light. Follow Rex. He knows the way. I'm sorry I couldn't be there to ask you myself. Leo." Jack read it twice. Then he pressed the paper against his chest and sat on the floor of his cold, dark, failing cabin. And for the first time since Leo's funeral, he let himself cry. Not the controlled, private kind of grief he'd been managing for years. Real crying. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and old and long held. Rex shifted on the rug and pressed his warm weight against Jack's side, and Jack put one arm around the old dog and held on. They stayed like that for a long time. The fire crackled, the storm howled, and two old soldiers, one human, one not, grieved together in the dark for the man they had both loved. When Jack finally stood, something in his face had changed. The emptiness was still there, but underneath it, something else had appeared. Purpose. "All right, Rex," he said quietly, his voice steadier than it had been in months. "Show me." They left before dawn. Jack packed light. Rifle, flashlight, medical kit, the things a soldier packs without thinking. Rex moved ahead of him through the snow, slower than he once would have been, favoring the bandaged paw slightly but never stopping, never hesitating. He moved with the deliberate confidence of a dog who had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. The mountains were brutal in the dark. Wind tore through the tree gaps, snow came in waves. Jack kept his head down and followed Rex's dark shape moving ahead of him through the white, trusting the dog the way soldiers learn to trust things they can't fully explain. It took nearly 2 hours. Rex stopped at the base of a massive granite cliff face, half hidden by pine trees that had grown tall and close against the rock. Jack stood beside him, breathing hard, scanning the stone wall in front of them. Rex stepped forward and pressed his paw firmly against a specific point on the rock face, a stone that looked identical to every other stone. A sound came from deep within the mountain, a low mechanical groan, like something old and heavy waking up. And then, slowly, a section of granite, not rock at all, but reinforced composite designed to look like rock, swung outward on hidden hinges. Behind it stood a steel door, and set into the steel door, a numeric keypad. Jack stared at it. Then he looked down at Rex. The dog looked back at him calmly. Jack typed the only number that made sense, Leo's service number, the one he still remembered without trying. The door opened. What was inside stopped Jack completely. The bunker was large, climate-controlled, running on its own power system, humming quietly in the silence of the mountain. Rows of servers lined one wall, a weapons cache occupied another. Legal, military-grade, secured, and across 3 long tables, organized with the careful precision that had always been Leo's trademark, were files. hard drives, printed documents, and a laptop computer, open with a single folder on the desktop labeled with one word: justice. Jack sat down slowly, and over the next 3 hours, he read. Leo had spent his final years uncovering what had really happened on that mission overseas, the mission the Army called a tragic accident. It wasn't an accident. A powerful private defense contractor had been secretly selling American military equipment to enemy groups in exchange for intelligence access and contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Several soldiers had died because of it. When Leo got too close to the truth, they arranged his death and buried the evidence. But Leo had known they were coming. He had built this place. He had prepared every file, every recording, every piece of evidence, organized and encrypted and ready. And he had trusted Rex to carry his final message to the one man he believed would see it through. Jack sat back in the chair and stared at the ceiling for a long moment. Rex padded over quietly and rested his chin on Jack's knee. Jack looked down at him. "He knew I'd almost give up, didn't he?" Jack said softly. It wasn't a question. Rex held his gaze steadily. "He sent you to stop me." Jack reached down and gently cupped the old dog's face in both weathered hands. "Good boy," he whispered. "Good boy." They didn't have long. Somewhere in the corporation's security network, an alarm had triggered when the bunker opened. Within 6 hours, a team of private contractors, armed and experienced, moved into the mountains. But they were moving into Jack Thompson's mountains now. He knew this terrain. He had trained in worse, and he had spent 23 years learning how to be very dangerous in very small spaces with very little time. He didn't need to defeat them. He just needed to buy time. Using the bunker's own external cameras, Jack watched the team's approach. He used the mountain, the snowdrifts, the tree lines. He moved Rex to a secured inner room first. "Stay. You've done your part, brother." And then Jack Thompson, 50 years old, tired in his bones, with a bad knee and a 20-year-old rifle, went to work. He didn't fire a single shot. He didn't need to. Carefully placed flares in the wrong directions, a triggered rock slide from a ridge he'd mapped on the bunker's own survey system, radio jamming equipment Leo had installed. By the time the contractors realized they were being led in circles in a whiteout blizzard, the signal was already transmitting. Jack had found Leo's final file, password Rex, and sent everything, all of it, to 3 investigative journalists, the FBI field office in Portland, and a senator Leo had named in his personal notes as someone who could be trusted. The contractors were found 2 hours later by county sheriff deputies responding to Jack's call. Cold, disoriented, and carrying illegal weapons on American soil, they had a great deal of explaining to do. The story broke 4 days later. Then, it exploded. Within 2 weeks, 3 senior executives of the defense contractor were under federal indictment. Congressional hearings were announced, and the United States Army quietly and formally issued a statement clearing the name of Staff Sergeant Leo Vance, killed not in a tragic accident, but in the line of duty, serving the truth when it cost him everything. Jack heard about it on a small radio in a motel room in Pine Ridge, Rex asleep on the bed beside him. The motel owner had taken one look at the old dog and said, "He can stay, no charge." Jack sat in the chair by the window and listened to the newscaster read Leo's name. His jaw worked. He didn't cry this time. He just nodded slowly, the way soldiers nod when something finally gets right that was wrong for too long. "They know now, brother," he said quietly to the room. "Everybody knows." On a clear morning 3 days later, Jack walked back up the mountain one final time. He stood at the bunker entrance with Rex beside him. He had one thing left to do. Inside, on the central table, he placed Leo's photograph, The same one from his cabin, soft edges and all, beside the old military tag Rex had carried through the blizzard. Then he activated the bunker's self-destruct protocol. Leo had built it in from the beginning. Some things, once their purpose is fulfilled, are meant to be sealed away. He and Rex walked back out into the sunlight. The mountain was still and white and impossibly beautiful in the morning light. The storm had passed completely. The sky was the kind of deep winter blue that makes a person feel like the world just washed itself clean. Parked at the base of the trail was an old green pickup truck, Leo's truck, left with Samuel Croft, the old Vietnam veteran who had cared for Rex, with instructions to bring it here when the time came. Samuel stood beside it now, old and straight-backed, and when he saw Jack coming down the trail with Rex walking slowly at his side, the old man simply removed his hat and held it to his chest. Jack stopped in front of him. Neither man spoke for a moment. "He knew you'd make it," Samuel said finally. His voice was rough with age and something older than age. Jack looked at him. "You kept Rex safe all this time." "Rex kept himself safe," Samuel said. "I just kept him fed and warm and told him you were coming." He paused. He never stopped waiting. Jack looked down at Rex. The old shepherd looked back up at him. And then, slowly, Rex walked forward, leaned his whole body against Jack's leg, and closed his eyes. Jack stood there in the mountain sunlight with his hand resting on Rex's back, feeling the steady rhythm of the old dog breathing, and something he had forgotten was inside him. Something quiet and real and worth protecting came back. He scratched Rex gently behind the ears, and for the first time in more years than he could count, Jack Thompson smiled. Not the polite, hollow kind, a real one. Slow and deep and rising from somewhere that had been dark for a long time. He opened the truck door. Rex climbed in carefully, turned once, and settled on the passenger seat with his chin resting on the doorframe, watching the mountain. Jack got behind the wheel. The engine turned over on the first try. He sat there a moment, both hands on the wheel, looking at the road ahead. It was uncertain. He didn't know where it led exactly. The cabin was gone, the savings were gone, the old life was gone. But something had been returned to him that mattered more than any of those things. He had a reason to drive forward. He put the truck in gear. Real courage isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up bleeding on a porch in a blizzard. It waits for years without being asked to. It presses its chin on your knee in the darkest moment and reminds you, without a single word, that you are not finished yet. Leo Vance never stopped believing in his brother, and Rex carried that belief through ice and snow and years of silence until it reached the man who needed it most. If you've ever felt like the road ahead was too dark to walk, remember Jack. Remember Rex. Remember that loyalty doesn't expire and purpose has a way of finding you. Sometimes on four legs, in a blizzard, when you've already reached for your coat. If stories like this one matter to you, stories about real courage, quiet loyalty, and the unbreakable bond between veterans and their dogs, then subscribe to Jack and Rex Tales. Every story we tell is a reminder that the best of humanity still lives in the hearts of people like Jack and in the steady, faithful eyes of dogs like Rex. Hit that subscribe button. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it today. And remember, you are never as alone as the storm makes you feel.